Welcome to Globewise Entertainment, where the hidden, the shocking, and the unforgettable stories of Hollywood come to life. Today we're diving into the outrageous, banned, and brutally censored world of 1980s cinema. These aren't your typical popcorn flicks. These are the films that scared censors, sparked protests, and were pulled from theaters around the globe. From raw violence to taboo themes, these controversial movies pushed the boundaries of what was acceptable, and many paid the price. Some were banned for years. Others were cut to pieces. But they all left a mark on film history. So grab your VHS rewinders and dim the lights, because these 11 shocking films are about to take you on a ride. If you haven't subscribed to Globewise Entertainment yet, hit that button now for more bold stories from behind the silver screen. And don't forget, which of these movies shocked you the most? Tell us in the comments below. 1. The Last Temptation of Christ, 1988. Director Martin Scorsese. Star Willem Dafoe as Jesus. Few films have sparked as much fury and debate as The Last Temptation of Christ. Released in 1988, this Martin Scorsese-directed drama was not your typical biblical epic. Instead of presenting Jesus as an untouchable divine figure, the film portrayed him as deeply human, tormented by doubt, fear, desire, and internal struggle. Based on the novel by Nikos Kazantzakis, the movie dared to ask, what if Jesus imagined living a normal human life? A carpenter, a husband, a man free from his divine burden. In one deeply controversial sequence, Jesus envisions a life where he marries Mary Magdalene and raises a family. To many Christians, especially in conservative and Catholic communities, this was blasphemy. The backlash was immediate and fierce. Banned in Greece, Turkey, Chile, Mexico, and parts of the Middle East. Censored or protested in the United States, France, and the Philippines. In France, Christian fundamentalists firebombed a theater showing the film, injuring 13 people. In the U.S., major retailers like Blockbuster refused to stock it. In South America, riots broke out. Scorsese, a Catholic himself, never intended to insult faith. He argued the film was a spiritual exploration of Christ's sacrifice, not a denial of his divinity. But for many it crossed a sacred line. To this day, The Last Temptation of Christ stands as a symbol of the eternal tension between artistic freedom and religious reverence, and it remains one of the most powerful banned films of the 1980s. 2. The Beyond, 1981. A gateway to hell too gruesome for censors. In the eerie stillness of 1980s horror, one film clawed its way out of the shadows, The Beyond, directed by Italy's horror maestro Lucio Fulci. At first glance, it seemed like another atmospheric fright fest set in a creepy Louisiana hotel. But behind its crumbling walls and cryptic whispers lay a film so unrelentingly disturbing that it would be banned, censored, and chopped to pieces across the world. The story follows Liza, a woman who inherits a rundown hotel, unaware that it's built on one of the 7 gateways to hell. As renovations begin, strange deaths pile up, blind girls warn of doom, corpses refuse to stay dead, and the veil between the living and the damned disintegrates. Fulci doesn't follow logic, he follows nightmares. What pushed censors over the edge wasn't just the gore. It was the surreal, dreamlike violence that unfolded like a fevered hallucination. From a man's face being eaten by acid to spiders chewing off someone's eyeballs, Fulci turned bodily destruction into twisted poetry. In the UK, The Beyond landed on the infamous Video Nasties list, banned under the Obscene Publications Act for its graphic content. Critics called it incoherent and sick, but fans hailed it as a masterpiece of macabre imagination. In Germany and Australia, it faced heavy cuts or outright prohibition. Over time, though, the cult around The Beyond grew. Fans saw it not just as violent but visionary, an experience where logic collapsed and dread ruled, earning it a place in horror history. Today, The Beyond is celebrated as one of Fulci's greatest works. Not just banned but unforgettable. 3. Mondocane, 1980s re-releases. Shock around the world. In the 1980s, audiences looking for gritty realism stumbled upon something far more disturbing. Mondocane, a film that blurred the line between documentary and exploitation. Originally released in 1962, Mondocane was rediscovered and re-released in various countries during the 1980s, and that's when the real controversy reignited. The film billed itself as a globe-trotting look at strange customs, rituals, and traditions from different cultures. But critics and censors around the world quickly saw through the marketing. What they witnessed wasn't just travel documentary flair. It was a deeply unsettling montage of animal cruelty, staged scenes, and sensationalist portrayals of non-Western societies. In Australia, parts of Europe, and even the US, Mondocane faced bans, heavy censorship, or was relegated to underground cinema circuits. The scene where turtles are turned upside down and left to die under the sun horrified viewers and animal rights advocates alike. In Germany and the UK, screenings drew protests and censorship boards moved to restrict the film for its graphic content and potential to incite xenophobia. Despite, or perhaps because of the outrage, Mondocane left a lasting impact. It spawned an entire genre of so-called Mondo films that leaned even harder into shock value, often crossing the line into outright exploitation. The film's haunting theme song, More, was even nominated for an Academy Award, an ironic twist for a movie so widely condemned. Mondocane wasn't just a film. It was a mirror reflecting our morbid curiosity back at us. And in the 1980s, that reflection proved too raw for many societies to stomach. 4. Ms. 45, 1981. A mute woman's vengeance that terrified censors. In the gritty streets of early 80s New York, director Abel Ferrara delivered a brutal tale that would ignite debate across critics and censorship boards alike. Ms. 45 wasn't just another exploitation flick. It was a searing, blood-soaked response to violence against women. The story follows Thana, a shy and mute garment worker portrayed hauntingly by Zoe Lund, who becomes the victim of not one, but 2 rapes in a single day. Broken and traumatized, Thana doesn't seek help, she arms herself. What follows is a descent into vigilante justice as she roams the city, luring predatory men to their doom. The film's unrelenting revenge narrative shocked audiences, but what truly disturbed censors was its moral ambiguity. Ms. 45 doesn't offer easy answers, just blood, trauma, and a woman who's had enough. Critics at the time dismissed it as dangerous and perverse. The film was heavily cut or banned in several countries, including Ireland and parts of the UK, due to its graphic violence, sexual assaults, and unsettling tone. Feminist groups were divided. Some decried it as exploitation, while others saw it as a radical expression of female rage in a patriarchal world. Today, Ms. 45 is recognized as a cult classic, one that forced audiences to confront the consequences of unchecked trauma and the silent society often forces on women. 5. Maniac, 1980. The horror that went too far. In 1980, Maniac hit the screens like a scream in the dark, and it wasn't long before the world tried to silence it. Directed by William Lustig and starring Joe Spinell in a terrifyingly unhinged performance, Maniac follows a disturbed man stalking and murdering women in New York City, haunted by the abuse he suffered from his mother. The film was drenched in a gritty, claustrophobic atmosphere, punctuated by ultra-realistic gore from the legendary makeup artist Tom Savini, who, in a scene that burned itself into horror history, also gets his own head blown off on screen. But Maniac did more than shock, it enraged. In the United Kingdom, it was immediately swept up in the video nasty panic, a moral hysteria over violent VHS tapes corrupting the youth. Censors declared the film dangerous, with its brutal depictions of violence against women stirring public outcry and feminist backlash. The film was banned outright, and distributors who tried to sneak it into stores faced legal action. Even in the United States, it faced severe cuts and limited theatrical releases, with critics calling it sleazy, morally bankrupt, and repulsive. But beneath the controversy, some saw art in the madness. Maniac was a psychological portrait of trauma, abuse, and isolation, presented through a lens that was both horrifying and tragically human. Over the years, Maniac earned cult status. Its raw, guerrilla filmmaking and relentless atmosphere inspired a generation of filmmakers, and even led to a 2012 remake starring Elijah Wood. Still, the original remains one of the most disturbing and controversial horror films of the 1980s. a nightmarish vision that some countries refuse to let their citizens see. 6. Combat Shock 1986. The film that made audiences sick to their stomachs. In the gritty shadows of Staten Island, a former Vietnam soldier named Frankie haunts the streets, broken and lost. Combat Shock isn't just a film. It's a descent into hopelessness, poverty, and post-traumatic psychosis. Directed by Buddy Giovinazzo, this ultra-low-budget 1986 shocker wasn't made for box office glory. It was made to hurt, to make you feel the decay of the American dream in your bones. The film follows Frankie as he navigates a daily hell. A screaming mutant baby, an unemployable wife, loan sharks, flashbacks of wartime torture, and urban rot that feels radioactive. The atmosphere is thick with despair. Every frame oozes grime, and the soundtrack pulses like a dying heartbeat. What made Combat Shock so controversial wasn't just its grim narrative. It was how unrelentingly brutal and nihilistic it was. Scenes of heroin use, suicide, and a truly horrifying ending triggered moral outrage. Some countries refused to screen it. Even in the US, it was rebranded by Drrome Entertainment, who trimmed some of the more grotesque elements and marketed it under the misleading title American Nightmares, which turned out to be quite accurate after all. Critics were divided. Some saw it as exploitative trash. Others hailed it as a raw, uncompromising cry from a forgotten America. But one thing was clear. Audiences weren't ready. Some walked out. Others were left in stunned silence. Today, Combat Shock lives on as a cult classic, a nightmare that refuses to fade. 7. City of the Living Dead 1980. The gates of hell were too much for censors. Lucio Fulci's City of the Living Dead wasn't just another zombie movie. It was a full-blown descent into nightmarish surrealism that dared to go where even hardcore horror fans flinched. The film opens with a priest hanging himself in a graveyard, a grisly act that triggers the literal opening of the gates of hell. What follows is an onslaught of grotesque deaths, including the infamous scene where a woman vomits up her own internal organs. Slowly, painfully, and shockingly. Fulci's signature blend of atmospheric dread, gore-drenched effects, and nearly incomprehensible plotting created a cinematic fever dream. But it was too much for UK authorities. In the early 1980s, Britain launched a crusade against so-called video nasties, ultra-violent horror films distributed on VHS without proper classification. City of the Living Dead was swiftly banned and added to the notorious video nasty list. Authorities cited its extreme violence, psychological trauma, and blasphemous imagery. Even edited versions had trouble passing censors, and in some countries it remained banned for years. Yet despite or because of its censorship, the film became a cult sensation. Fans of Fulci hailed it as a masterpiece of nightmare logic, and horror historians credit it with pushing the boundaries of gore-based horror far beyond the Romero standard. Today, City of the Living Dead stands as a landmark of transgressive horror. It's not just banned, it's burned into the memory of those brave enough to watch it. 8. Emmanuel in America 1980s re-releases. Director Joe D'Amato. Genre erotic drama/exploitation. Why it was banned. Graphic sexual content, bestiality, and supposed snuff film sequences. In the depths of European exploitation cinema, few films pushed boundaries like Emmanuel in America. Released in the late 1970s but rediscovered and fiercely censored during 1980s re-releases, this film follows photojournalist Emmanuel as she journeys through the high society underworld. But her camera doesn't just capture scandal. It uncovers something darker. Emmanuel infiltrates elite circles of sex and secrecy, stumbling upon a network allegedly trafficking in snuff films, fictional recordings of real human deaths. What follows is a descent into graphic depravity, controversial even by 1970s standards. But it wasn't the eroticism alone that sparked outrage. It was the shocking scenes that blurred the line between fiction and horror reality, including an infamous and highly debated moment of bestiality. Censors in the UK, Australia, and parts of Europe outright banned the film. Even uncut VHS tapes were hunted down and destroyed. While many critics dismissed it as smut, Some argued that Emmanuel in America dared to expose taboos and moral rot beneath society's polished surface. To this day, the film remains one of the most notorious entries in the Italian Black Emmanuel series, reviled, banned, but never forgotten. 9. The House on the Edge of the Park, 1980. One party. One night. Unimaginable terror. In the shadowy wake of Last House on the Left, director Ruggero Deodato, already notorious for Cannibal Holocaust, unleashed another nightmare. The House on the Edge of the Park. It was 1980, and Italy's cinema was drenched in gore, sleaze, and social rebellion. But this one pushed even those boundaries. The plot was deceptively simple. Two working-class men, Alex, a sadistic sociopath played chillingly by David Hess, and his shy mechanic friend Ricky, crash a glamorous party thrown by upper-class elites. What starts as flirtation and mind games turns violently dark. The guests soon find themselves at the mercy of Alex's depravity, his charm twisting into cruelty, his rage into sadistic control. It's a raw, savage invasion of privilege by brutal poverty. But the real controversy wasn't just in the plot, it was in the execution. The film didn't shy away from its brutal themes: rape, humiliation, psychological torture. Deodato bathed the camera in an unflinching, exploitative gaze. Critics called it obscene, misogynistic, and even dangerously nihilistic. In the UK, it was banned outright as a video nasty, and it remained censored for over 2 decades. Australia followed suit, refusing to release the film uncut. Yet, beneath the horror, The House on the Edge of the Park dared to poke at deeper wounds: class division, social cruelty, and power reversal. Some argue it's more than exploitation. It's a social scream dressed in blood. But to many it crossed the line. Even today the film remains divisive, hailed by some as a cult classic and condemned by others as irredeemable filth. It stands as a grim reminder of just how far 1980s filmmakers were willing to go, and just how far society was willing to push back. 10. Bloody Moon, 1981. The slasher that got slashed by censors. In 1981, Bloody Moon sliced its way onto screens with a cocktail of camp, sleaze, and shock that was too much for censors to stomach. Directed by notorious exploitation filmmaker Jesus Franco, this German-Spanish slasher seemed like a typical gory thrill ride, until the violence crossed the line from pulpy fun into pure sadism. The plot follows a disfigured man recently released from a mental institution who stalks young women at a remote language school. But it's not just the killer's gruesome acts that sparked outrage. It's how the film lingers on the brutality, blending eroticism with bloodshed in ways critics called vile and misogynistic. One infamous scene involving a circular saw and a helpless victim became emblematic of why Bloody Moon landed on the UK's notorious video nasties list. The film was banned outright in Britain and heavily cut in many other countries, despite Franco's insistence that it was all just sleazy entertainment, nothing more. Over time, Bloody Moon gained cult status, embraced by fans of Euro horror for its synth-heavy score, surreal dialogue, and unapologetically trashy tone. But in the 1980s, it stood as a symbol of how far horror could go, and how fast the censors would strike back. 11. Drrome, 1983. The movie that predicted our digital nightmare. In 1983, David Cronenberg released a film that felt like a transmission from the future: Drrome. Blending body horror with biting media satire, the movie follows Max Wren, a sleazy cable TV executive who stumbles upon a mysterious pirated broadcast, Drrome, a show that airs graphic torture and murder. But this isn't just sick entertainment. It's a mind-altering signal that warps the viewer's brain, causing hallucinations and a terrifying fusion between man and machine. With its surreal visuals, sexual themes, and grotesque special effects, like a V slot forming in the protagonist's stomach, Drrome deeply disturbed 1980s audiences and censors alike. In some regions it was heavily censored, while in others, it faced distribution resistance for its provocative blend of sex, violence, and philosophical themes about media consumption. At the time, many thought it was just disturbing fiction. But today, Cronenberg's vision feels hauntingly prophetic, predicting a world where technology hijacks reality and screens become both seducers and destroyers. In fact, Drrome is often credited with predicting the rise of internet culture, deepfakes, and the obsession with violent content online. It may have been too radical for its time, but that's exactly what makes Drrome a cult classic and one of the most visionary and controversial films of the 1980s. Long live the new flesh. And there you have it, 11 of the most controversial films from the 1980s that shocked the world, challenged the censors, and refused to play by the rules. From gore-soaked horrors to provocative political thrillers, these films remind us just how powerful and dangerous cinema can be when it dares to go too far. Now it's your turn. Which of these banned or censored films do you think was too extreme, or maybe just ahead of its time? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read every one. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Globewise Entertainment for more deep dives into the wild, weird, and untold stories of Hollywood. New videos drop regularly, and trust us, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Until then, keep watching and stay controversial.